Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 259 of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by my co-hosts. A man who never stays in the same place more than, for 1 week, John Stern.
Hi, everyone.
And a man who is super jealous of my state championship plaque behind me, Seth Manfield.
Yeah, my name is Seth Manfield, but there's no other Seth Manfield here, so I'll just assume you.
Dude, what's up? You join this podcast and you just get like back-to-back top 8 weekends or something? Like, what the heck?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Is that
Wait, did you top 8 this weekend? I don't even know what happened this weekend.
Yeah, he top 8'd the SCG Open.
Oh, congrats. Good job.
Thanks, man.
Was that Baltimore?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It was a 25-minute drive, so I figured it was worth my time to go.
Well, you know who won't forget about you the way that John just forgot about Seth is our sponsor, Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 15% off your first order by using the code CCMTG. You get 4% off of every order by using the code with the good. You don't like that, John?
I didn't forget about it. I never knew. I mean, I saw one thing from Baltimore, and that's that Ross won with Drake's. That's all I know.
I'm just
was that the same tournament?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you playing Black Green or?
No, it was Modern.
Oh. Okay. So what were you playing?
I was playing Jeskai. Could have been, honestly, all of the decks are in Standard and Modern, so
yeah,
it's an easy confusion to
I actually knew it was Modern because I was working on that deck. Anyway. All right. Congrats.
I think I played a different deck every round, so it was pretty refreshing.
Yeah, that's nice for Modern.
Yeah.
You can support the podcast directly by going to Patreon at patreon.com/ccmtg. Become a patron of the show. We just had a contest wrap up on Patreon. So if you were a patron of the show, you got entered into this contest. Any patrons got entered into this one. And I always say your name wrong, and I'm really sorry, but I believe it's Kaio. But you know who you are. I'll shoot you a message. I really appreciate your patronage. We're going to give you a playset of any card in Standard. Just shoot me a message, and we'll get you set up. We have a new contest going on in the Discord. It's already started. People are already posting 4-1 or better lists. So if you win, 4-1 or better on MTGO or Arena, go ahead and post a screenshot in there. And we're gonna do a contest through December. Whoever posts the most screenshots, deck lists, and the proof of the record, get those deck lists rolling in, and we're gonna give out a swag bag of Constructive Criticism swag this month. So. All right, well, let's go right on to always improving this week. So this is the point of the podcast. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. We want to be doing what we can all the time to improve ourselves. And this week, I'll start us off. This week in Magic, I watched a ton of coverage, something that I don't normally do. When it's just SCGs, I haven't been watching the SCG circuit much, just due to the fact that I basically only watch when Cedric's commentating. Really, is what the answer is. It was really enjoyable for me this week. Refreshing to watch Modern, seeing tons of innovation. If you had told me that decks that were going to do well with as many cards from Guilds of Ravnica, Seth, I don't know that I would have believed it.
I was impressed with the Drake's deck specifically.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. It was rooting on Seth. Throughout the weekend, it was really good. And I wanted to take to heart something that we said. I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but just watching to learn and watching not to correct. I haven't been playing a ton of Modern recently. It's my least favorite format, but I wanted to give a chance to kind of take stock of the format, see what people are doing, what the format shakes out like, and what strategies rise to the top. And it was kind of refreshing to not try and dissect everything, but just kind of take it in. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a nice change of pace for me from how I normally watch Magic coverage.
Do you watch while you're doing something else, or is this your primary focus?
So I normally will have like a stream on in the background, but this time I actually sat down and watched coverage.
Okay, that's cool.
So piggybacking off of that, I actually sometimes I like watching my own, I like, as weird as this sounds, I like watching my own matches, or just and just the tournament in general. And I enjoyed even just like rewatching, I rewatched some of the rounds, not all of them, but P Sully and Cedric are like
Yeah, they're
great.
great.
really nice, and I felt like I was, it was a very well run event, even though it was long. Like for me specifically, it was just like the most rounds I've played in like forever, between 2 days. But
Hashtag humble brags.
well, yeah, normally I have buys, and there are
Oh,
people
you have 0 buys for SCG, right? That's
yeah.
yeah.
So
So you got to go back and watch your matches. That's something that I've done in every feature match I've ever had. Do you take notes? Is there a, or do you just kind of take stock into what you did? How things went, what you could have done differently.
I don't really write down specific notes because I'm not going to be bringing those with me to
Sure.
matches and things like that. And for me, like everyone's different. Like if I write down sideboard notes, a lot of times I just don't even look at them because it's all in my head. But there's also plenty of people who that's very useful to have a page of sideboard notes with them.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Only I do write things down, but I don't ever bring it with me. It's more to commit it to memory than anything else.
Yeah.
So that's typically like I don't know that I've ever taken out a sideboard guide since my PTQ days, but I certainly have made a lot of sideboard guides for myself.
Sure. Yeah, it's exactly like what you said. Like you write it down and then you remember it, and then you throw the piece of paper that you just like wrote it down on, or like
What about you, John? What have you done the last 2 weeks to try and improve at Magic the Gathering or life in general?
Well, I guess so. What I've been working on is this Arclight Phoenix deck in Modern. And I guess the thing I'm trying to improve on, or have been trying to improve on, and I guess I found this a problem on teams where you want to get information from someone else, but nobody's really good at communicating the reasons for their decisions. Like, oh, I added this card because this card is great, and that's kind of where it ends. So a lot of people have been asking me about this Phoenix deck, and I've been trying to sort of distill the reasons for the decisions I made and try to practice giving more concrete answers to these questions. Like why this card over this card, or why do you sideboard that in the matchup? And also think about what questions I would want to ask people to get the right information instead of just saying, should I play this deck? So yeah, those just whenever I make a decision for the deck, I'm trying to sort of formulate my thoughts as I would explain them to someone else. Even if I don't need to do that for my own benefit, I think at some point, if you start having success, you're going to be collaborating with people, and being a good communicator is extremely valuable in that situation. It will improve your process and make people want to work with you. So that's where I'm trying to improve.
I've tried to do this kind of a lot of times personally. There was a time when I on my stream where I was wanting to take notes between games, and I was really able to do that really easily on MTGO because there's like an actual really easy break between your matches on MTGO. But as I moved to Arena on my streaming, it's become a lot harder for me to remember to do it because it's just like a one button, really fast games. It's become a lot harder. Is there advice that you would give to somebody that wanted to? I mean, specifically me. I want to become a better communicator, John. What are some of the questions that you've been asking yourself for you to answer?
Okay, for example, I tried a version of Arclight Phoenix in Modern with Monastery Swiftspear. I think it's not good, and I have to sort of explain. Okay, I don't think it's good because you have to cast all your spells in one turn, which makes the Swiftspear a lot worse against sort of any deck that can produce a chump blocker. And it's a bad late game draw. It doesn't bring back your Phoenix. And really all you want to do is like set up your explosive turn with Thing in the Ice or Arclight Phoenix, and Swiftspear doesn't play into that. Also, the deck kind of relies on evasion. So like it's just not a very synergistic card, even though you have a lot of spells.
Sure.
So I think like saying something like that is better than just saying, yeah, Swiftspear sucks, don't play it. So
I would agree with that.
That's kind of what I'm like. I'm trying to be able to give more concrete answers, which since I don't always, like Seth was saying, he remembers once he's had the thought, he remembers it pretty well. I'm not that way. If I haven't touched the deck in a week, I basically forget everything if I don't have some reference. So like I'll need to like look at my paper and say, oh, I cut this for this, and then that's all I have to see, and then I remember my whole thought process. So I'm going to try to do that a little more. I'm just starting that plan. I haven't really done it yet, so we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. That was a really good one. Thanks for that, John. Awesome. Well, during the hashtag Always Improving segment, we typically invite listeners to ask questions on the show. Specifically patrons of the show. If you're a patron, you go to the Patreon thread. There's a thread for you to ask questions on there. But this week, we did a special we're doing a special Patreon episode. So if you're a patron of $12 or more, you get access to the Constructed Critics group on Facebook. And in that group, we've had a thread going where members of that Facebook group could ask questions to do a mailbag episode. So this week, instead of a single Patreon episode and doing a training grounds, we're going to go directly to our listeners and kind of go to their questions. So with that being said, let's just start. We have a few questions this week, Seth. So let's start off with this one, man. How much testing do you do on Arena now? And we'll start with you, Seth.
Okay, well, I think this is a bit of a transition period. Arena currently doesn't host every format, so if I want to play, first of all, there's paper testing, right, and then there's online testing. For me, because I don't necessarily have a ton of time to go to my local game store or do that type of thing, I'm normally testing online. So given that, if I'm playing Modern or Legacy, it's going to be on Magic Online. And then if I want to be drafting or Standard, now I'm considering Arena more. And I think that I expect that over the next few months and the year and over the next year or so, I will be using it more and more. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. Like, I just started using Arena a couple months ago, and I'm confident that I will be using it more and more to test.
Yeah. So I'll go next. I do 100% of my. Well, that's not true. That's not fair. If I don't own the deck on Arena, I do have mana traders for Modern and Legacy. So if I don't own the Standard deck and I don't want to just dump money into Arena, I will test it on Magic Online first to see if I want to buy the deck. That's happened twice. But other than that, like if I have the stuff to craft the cards, I've typically just done 100% Arena testing. And the reason for me is just game speed's high. The caliber of player is slightly lower, but it's not that much. One of the common misconceptions is that you only have best of ones on Arena, or that you have just strange mulligans on Arena. And that's actually not true in the competitive queues. So if you're playing competitive draft or if you're playing competitive constructed, it's just like playing Magic Online, but way faster and way more fun and way better. The only difference is sometimes you're going to run into some awkward decks, but there is a ranking system for the decks on Arena. So they give your deck a score, and then you have a score. I think it's based off ELO. I'm not 100% sure. So you actually typically get paired to somebody closer to you in skill, except for when you're just starting out. But there's a deck score that adjusts for that. So you're not going to just be paired against really horrible decks to start off with. Go ahead.
Yeah, part of the thing I really enjoy about Arena is just like building up my collection. Like I haven't invested a ton of money into it, but so that's part of why I'm like, well, maybe I have a deck available to me on like if I want to try playing Jeskai, I might do it online, on Magic Online rather, because I just don't have the cards yet for Arena, but I have Golgari on Arena. So and then just like playing even just getting into it just to start when I started my new account and just like picking up whatever the like mono green precon was with like the random stuff. And it's just kind of, you play against more of a variety of things, I felt like. So I think some people might classify that as being less competitive. I don't necessarily equate those two as being the same.
Yeah.
But
it kind of just depends. They have things in place so that you're playing against similar stuff to what you're playing, and that's good. That's like a good experience. And so if you're looking for a good experience, that's kind of it. But for example, as somebody who I think my last tournament I played Legacy, I did 100% of my testing on Magic Online. I didn't do any paper testing. But if I'm playing standard, I have every deck, so I'm going to be in the arena queues. John, what about you?
Well, my answer to the question is that I'm doing no testing on Arena right now. But I've thought about it and I've talked to some people. One of the things I like about it is, so I think the whole double queuing and waiting for people who are, basically wasting your time doesn't exist. I think that's really good. I have two major problems specifically for constructed. Draft is a whole different ballgame with the AI component, but I don't want to invest time playing Arena in order to be able to test. I also don't want to just throw a ton of money into it. And Magic Online is at a point for me where I don't have to do those things. I don't need to build my collection. I'm renting cards. I can afford to rent the cards. I don't have to buy a deck, try it for a league, and then sell it, buy a new deck. I also worry about the lack of financial incentive reducing competition specifically. My understanding, and you can correct me because I don't really know, is that it's quite cheap to play the leagues. The prize support scales approximately the same as Magic Online, but because it's cheap to play, you are winning less and you can't get your money out of the system. I think that's great for people who just want to have fun and play Magic, and I think the interface is probably really good for that. But as soon as they added, prize support to the queues online, like you immediately start to see the level of competition go up.
Yeah.
And just in terms of like what decks people are playing, what builds, they'll try things, but they're going to try things that are potentially competitive. So yeah, I'm worried about those two aspects.
Yeah, and that's really fair. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I think John's concerns are valid, and I have similar concerns, and I think that Wizards is trying to juggle, having Arena cater to every type of player, right? Casual, competitive, everything in between. Players who are just starting out. I've heard a lot of players who have said, "Oh, now my girlfriend is enjoying playing Magic and understands what's going on because she's on Arena." That type of thing. And I think they just had an announcement today about some type of ladder play or more in-depth ranking system. I didn't fully check it out, but they're constantly creating they're creating new updates. And I feel, and this is still like a work in progress. Like the beta just recently finished, and I feel like it's a progression where if you're already invested, or preferably renting, because I do think that's the best way to play Magic Online right now these days, then that's reasonable. But if you're wanting to get into one of these two platforms, I would definitely go with Arena. And I believe that based on this trajectory, there are going to be more incentives and more competitive level events on Arena. I'm pretty confident of that.
That's what I was going to say. I mostly agree with John. I think that, for the most part, I don't feel when you 5-0 a league, right, on Magic Online, it a competitive league, it's like, oh, I just made money. And when you do that on Arena, it doesn't feel that way. So I definitely get where John is coming from on that.
It's less of an initial financial commitment that you have to put down, but it's kind of like the burden's on you. I feel like because you're actually getting cards out of doing well, and you can kind of pick and choose based on your wild cards. You can kind of choose, all right, this is what I want. Yeah. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier to just kind of get a deck together without a huge financial burden, I would say. Sure. And it's only it's not like you have to buy into modern cards. So even if you are investing into Arena, you're capped out at a couple $100, right? It's not like you there's no reason why you would have to really go beyond that. I think, unless it's just to play, which is the same as Magic Online. Yeah. But like Sean is saying, there's not really currently a redemption system to kind of get your money back. So you're really just paying for the pleasure of playing. And if that's your thing, then yeah.
What would you say? Can I just ask a question about that? I guess there's probably a lot of viewers who also haven't tried Arena, even though it's taking off a little bit. What kind of time investment would you say you need to put in if you're putting in a very minimal financial investment, like $20, $30, to actually get to a point where you're playing a tier standard deck? How much time would you need to put in?
Probably once every 3 days.
You play once every 3 days, and after how long would you have a deck, would you say?
So are you saying you're putting in like $20 to $30 a month?
No, I'm saying like from an initial, like you buy the program, does it cost money?
Yeah. So our one of our sister podcasts, Even Odds, did an entire podcast on this for the Constructor Criticism Network. But here's like it. So if you put in, let's say $50 right now, you will have a tier 1 standard deck.
Okay.
If you then go play and do your daily, so after 3 days your quests get full on Arena. And if you do that, you get about 5,000 gold every, I think it's 5 days around there, at the quest refill rate. So if you complete your quest and you're winning matches of Magic, like I have every single standard deck, and I've spent $100. Like
okay,
and
like, how many hours are you talking in order to complete your quests or whatever? Like, say you take
it's really fast. Like you can play for 1 hour and complete all your quests really easily.
And you do that every 3 days?
Yeah, that's you have two options, right? You can play every day too and complete quests, but you only get 1 quest per day. So and you have a max of 3 quests.
Okay.
So it kind of just depends on how you want to play. But I think Limited Resources just did an EV thing for Limited, so maybe that's something that we can do. I would have to like actually figure that out before we did something like that. But the investment is not as huge unless you want to be switching decks. But like if you look at something like its competitors, right? If you look at Hearthstone, you watch Brian Kibler, and he literally just drops $400 on a new set to get the entire set, every set. And I think it's probably cheaper than that by a significant margin on Arena.
Okay.
I mean, when you compare it to, all right, I want to buy into Golgari and Modern, on Magic Online. If you compare it to something like that, where like previously you were dropping a couple grand for a deck, it's very different if you are thinking about it in those terms.
And now that there's the renting service, things are a little bit different, but
yeah, I mean things have changed there too,
but also the price of your Magic Online cards has been cut in half since Arena dropped.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, what it used to be on Magic Online before that situation, and also Paper Magic, is that when you're investing in a Modern deck, you have an expected return on your investment at some point when you sell it. So it's, as far as I know, you cannot get any money out of Arena. Is that accurate?
That is true. There's currently not a way to get your money out. So nobody's going to be grinding this for profit. They're going to be playing because they want to, or in our case, playing to test. Yes. And if enough people are in our case, then that's fine. Can you choose your opponent? That might be something interesting. You can, but it's only for best of 1 right now. You have to remember that this is still in beta, but they will be introducing and fixing that relatively soon. And that is something that will change for competitive players, because it'll just mean that I can play 15 games with you, John, really, really fast across the world.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm definitely going to look into it. I mean, if viewers have specific questions about it, that'd be good. Maybe you do an episode at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to post them on the Patreon or on the Facebook group, and we will, if we get enough, we'll definitely do an episode on it. Let's move on to our next question, which is: I have a hard time tuning decks for Modern, but not for Standard. Any advice on tackling this issue? We'll start with you, John, because you've been working on a Modern deck recently.
Yeah. So, well, I guess what I would say first of all is that Modern decks have a lot less flexibility than Standard decks. They have, like, if you take a deck like Affinity, right? Like, you probably, the core of the deck is like 50 to 55 main deck cards, and probably half of your sideboard is untouchable. So you're really talking about playing with maybe 10 to 15 slots maximum, and most likely less than that. What I find tuning in Modern for me is less about, which 3-drop should I play, which 4-drop should I play, but more, there's so many decks in Modern. So if I pick up a deck like, say I'm playing Jund or something, I want to have a plan a sideboard plan for an understanding of every matchup, like maybe 20 different decks. So the first step for tuning for me is just having a lot of matchup expertise, knowing how Jund versus Mardu Pyromancer plays out post sideboard and what problems you're trying to solve. And then most of my time will be spent tweaking the numbers in the sideboard to make sure I have the right amount of cards coming out for every matchup. And just remembering that my deck isn't 60 plus 15, but it's 75 cards. So understanding where my weaknesses are. And also, I guess the other thing I would say is in standard, you kind of feel like you can solve any matchup to an extent. If you're playing like Drakes in standard and you're like, oh, I want to beat, aggro, there's cards you can put in that like more removal or whatever that give you a better chance. In modern, there are matchups that you're never going to get to 50%. And you're going to either hope to avoid them or to maximize your chances, even though you're behind. So like increasing your win percentage from 25 to 35 would be a goal, especially some of the more lopsided matchup decks like Tron, for example. And yeah, just I think maybe this question is coming a little from the fact that he's got matchups he cannot solve, or he or she, I don't know who asked the question. And there's really, you just have to accept that there are going to be bad matchups and just make sure you have a good plan against everything. And that's basically how I tune in modern.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what John is saying here. Really, modern isn't as much about tuning. It's about, first of all, the first and most important thing is choosing your deck. So once you kind of choose the deck based on the metagame and being able to know your matchups and feel comfortable playing the deck, then you get to tuning. But that's like, tuning is like the fourth step, or like the last step, where you kind of like, all right, this is the deck I want to play. Now, are there any slots that I can play around with? Because like I think I'm going to be playing Tron next weekend, for instance. So if I'm playing Tron, am I going to start, oh, I want to cut a Tron land for a forest? Because like, no, like I'm not going to cut an Ancient Stirrings. I'm not going to cut a Karn. I'm not going to cut this. I'm not going to cut that. There's not very many slots in the deck, So it's about like, all right, there's like 4 or 5 slots on the sideboard or whatever that I can kind of play around with based on what I'm expecting. Like if I think there's going to be a lot of graveyard decks like Dredge, maybe I'll add another Grafdigger's Cage or something like that. But it's not like, modern is such a big format that like last weekend, I already mentioned it, I played against 14 different decks. So you can't really metagame too hard for one thing. You want to be making choices that are good against the entire field. And in terms of standard is changing much faster. Like there's new sets being released. There's more innovations that can be had. In modern, we have one deck that I would say you can really innovate with right now, which is the Arclight deck, because that's pretty new. Whether it's mono red or blue red, I don't think there's like a consensus best version of playing with Arclight Phoenix in modern. So like that's like the new deck. But if you're picking up humans or you're picking up whatever deck, it's kind of already there for you. It's just about learning it and then making maybe a few choices, but nothing major in terms of playing with it.
I think like tuning your understanding more so than tuning, like you were talking about Tron. I think like something, for example, is you have Thought-Knot Seers usually in your sideboard. Do you bring those in against a mid-range deck? That's something that maybe is not obvious to everyone. And that's the kind of thing that I'd be trying to figure out if I was tuning the deck, is like, okay, are these cards going to be good in this matchup more so than what should I play? But anyway.
I was going to say a lot of the same things that were already said. One of the things that I was going to talk about is you've got to know what your flex slots are before you can even start tuning. You both mentioned that. Kind of before we move on from this question, Seth, one of the big things that happened this weekend is you and Brad were playing Electrolyze. How did you and Brad come to the decision to play Electrolyze?
Well, I saw it in Brad's list and every other, and so that helped when he messaged me the list with Electrolyze. But beyond that, I think the card is like I've watched Jeskai decks and really smart Jeskai players. Like I was playing at the last Pro Tour and I watched Guillaume Wafotapa. I think he had 4 copies of Electrolyze in his deck, and he's like one of the best control players that there is.
Right.
And Electrolyze is a card that it's always going to be good. It feels like no matter what, it's just like a flexible card. The ability to like against any creature deck, it's normally almost always going to be a 2-for-1. And I felt like I wanted to be able to have a card like that rather than a card like just another card draw spell. Like for me, playing the second and the third Electrolyze was over a card like a Hieroglyphic Illumination.
That makes sense.
Or an Ancestral Vision. And I felt like I wanted to just not get run over, and Electrolyze was kind of just exactly what I wanted for this field.
The next question is, I'd like the best strategies for attacking control decks. I'm thinking like Blue White or Blue Moon. I'm thinking about sideboards. How much counter magic versus how much proactive cards like Notion Thief. So when you're trying to attack a control deck in Modern, what are your go-tos? I think this player's playing Esper mid-range for what it's worth.
Okay.
I mean, there's some specific cards where you like, say it's a Thrun the Last Troll or whatever. You put that into your deck and it's specifically for control. I'm putting this in my deck because it's really hard to deal with and it has hexproof, etc., etc. But there's not that many cards like that. So like in Modern, when I'm playing with control, like, yes, there's like your hexproof threats. There's your Lingering Souls type cards. But beyond that, I feel like there's not like one specific card that you can put in your deck that's gonna like completely change your matchup against control.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to attack a control deck with a control deck, I think that you just have to understand what the matchup is about more than anything. This is just true in most control mirrors I found, is that at some point, it's how are these games? If we laid out our decks, like how are 15 games going to play out most of the time? Because you can make the game about what you want in the control mirror, and it's your job to do that. That's how you gain that edge.
Yeah, I agree. Like I thought I actually didn't play any control this past weekend. I put Geist of Saint Traft in my sideboard as a one of, just because that control matches are, if it's a mirror and that's what you're trying to target, are going to go likely many turns. So even if it's just adding one card in your deck, there's a pretty high likelihood you're going to draw it.
Right.
And so I put Geist in my deck because it's a 3-mana card that, because it's 3 mana, you can cast it, you can hold up counter magic, and then it's pretty tough to deal with when your opponent is likely boarding out their Supreme Verdict. So I think that was my answer for this past weekend, was Geist.
Sure. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer to this question, I would take it on a more general scale. The most effective ways, I think, to fight control mirrors are, so you have to understand that you're trying to find a card that's going to be good against their post sideboard configuration. So in game one, they tend to have, like, I'm thinking more about standard really, but they tend to have more spot removal, more wrath effects, things like that. And in the control mirror, they have to board out some or all of these. So the most effective thing to do, if you can do it, I think, is to board in a cheap threat that does more, like, that sort of has to be answered quickly or they're in big trouble. Like, I think Glint Sleeve Siphoner was a really good example. It gets in under counter magic a lot of the time, and it draws you cards which will help you win, help the rest of your game plan win. Even if they keep some answers to it in their deck, they're risking the times where they draw the answer, you don't draw the Glint Sleeve, and then their hand is worse. And I think it's important to have a threat that you can play that doesn't expose you to whatever haymaker they're, like, I don't want to play it like a, Lyra or something in the control mirror and they untap and play Teferi, then I like can't counter it. So I want something like, I think Legion Warboss is an example that people are using, where you can play it early enough and it can cascade out of control very quickly if they don't have an answer right away.
Yeah, I actually think that Crucible of Worlds has done a good job of kind of breaking the blue-white mirror wide open in Modern, because if you're on the play and you have a Crucible, it does the same thing. Unless they have negate, it often will get, or mana leak, it often will get right around them. And in the early turns, they're developing things by playing things like Serum Vision, so you can often just get that on the board and just get a tremendous advantage throughout the game.
Yeah, I think that's a good example.
Yeah.
Also think like anything that lets you see their hand, like if you're playing Esper, like duress effects. I mean, probably Thoughtseize at that point in Modern does a really good job of like knowing when they're vulnerable and also making their game plan more difficult. So really cheap.
Another example of a card, a type of card that is good against control, are the cards that, like the artifacts and enchantments, like a treasure map or like a search for a scanna, that just cards that the control deck you don't expect to be able to have easy, cheap removal for, that can provide card advantage, traditionally are good, and we're seeing kind of a move in that direction in Standard.
The next question says, John mentioned that he takes notes of his matches. I'm curious about his process for reviewing his play. What specifically is he writing down, and how does he use his notes to identify ways of improving?
So this is a question for Seth, I guess. So he's asking. There's two things going on here. Right now, I'm only taking notes for testing purposes. I'm not doing it for specifically improving my play. That's just, one step at a time. The kinds of things I write down. So if I play a match, I always want to write down how I sideboarded. It takes me 30 seconds during sideboarding. And it's something I will go back to frequently when I play the deck later. It's one of the downsides of playing in leagues as your primary testing, is that you're not getting, 10 matches in a row against Jessica. You're getting like one here, one in the next league, one 3 days later. And I want to see what I've tried. I want to, so I'd write down my sideboard notes. I write down anything I can identify as like, this is a problem for the matchup, or this is an idea of something to try, and any questions that I want to revisit later, like, I think Rekindling Phoenix might be good here. I want to try that, even though try that in the next league. I'll just make a note of that. And at some point,
would be really cool, John, is if because this is something that I used to do a lot, and I would be interested in doing it again. If you and I came up with a template and posted it in the Facebook group for listeners to try out for their testing, like kind of like a template of like, fill this out after your leagues, and then keep doing it, and then we'll talk about how to revisit it. Come up with something like that.
I did do something like that for when we started to use data in our testing process, and we wanted to sort of capture data. I created like a Google form that everyone could fill it on their cell phone, and it would submit to a spreadsheet. Mostly just the results of the match and any notes that were, the results of their whole league. But yeah, if you want to try and do something, sure, that I'm happy to do that. Mostly I just write down anything that I want to. I can remember. I have trouble remembering everything when I'm working on lots of different decks and lots of different formats, and just seeing, this is how I boarded in this matchup will remind me of what's important. So mainly sideboard plans, but yeah, we could template some other things like. I think one thing that I like to do that maybe a lot of people don't do is I'm always generating a list of questions of like, this is something that needs investigation, and then trying to cross those off at some point as you get close to the tournament.
You want to add anything to this, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of it has already been said, but keeping track of results is good. Like that's the first point where you're kind of like, all right, I played 10 matchups against Golgari in Standard, and this is my result and stuff like that. But I think it's also important to think about how the actual games feel, because sometimes it's beyond just the W or the loss. It's kind of like, all right, like maybe you made a misplay or your opponent made a misplay, and that might have kind of skewed the result one way or another. So just kind of reflecting and saying, all right, like this is how I sideboarded, and then maybe making changes and kind of going back to previous iterations or previously what you were doing with the deck, and then changing that in the future.
Up to next, we have I've lost in the finals of 2 PPTQs in a row. How do you untilt or overcome rough patches? When you've taken the right game lines and the game variants just don't allow you to close matches, whether it's Flood, Insane Screw, or top decks. This is such a. I'm going to go first on this because, so I have. I used to have a really hard time with tilting. There was a PTQ in Wyoming that I was undefeated in the Swiss. I was playing a Jund deck I was playing Jund in Modern. It was the Bloodbraid Elf, Deathrite Shaman deck before those cards were banned, and I had Lotus Cobra to break open the mirror, and I just destroyed this tournament in the Swiss. And then in the top 8, my former co-host Matt told me that my opponent was on blue-white control. So I jammed Lotus Cobra, expecting that I jammed Lotus Cobra on the play, and I thought, okay, well, this is sweet. Like, this is either going to get Path, and I'm going to get a Bloodbraid Elf, or it's going to be in play, and I'm going to get a Bloodbraid Elf. And then my opponent cracked his fetch land and cast Lightning Helix on it.
Yeah.
And I was so tilted. I was like, I don't even remember the rest of that game. I was so upset, and it's so easy to like get stuck in that moment, like to blame my teammate for telling me the wrong thing, when like it's time to like collect myself and just play the match from here on out.
Well, did you think that that was the wrong play if he was on Jeskai, or would you still play the Cobra?
I didn't even think about it. It didn't
right.
even.
You're just yeah.
Yeah. It was not even like a. It's probably. I mean, it's a little. It's obviously it's correct to jam the Lotus Cobra. It doesn't matter. Like it's. Man, it's so easy to like find an outside excuse for something that goes wrong, and it's just there's no point in doing it. I like your question though, John. Was it didn't even matter? Was it even wrong?
Yeah.
Like, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so we I always think back to that match and like how I very possibly let that game get away from me from just being like upset, possibly costing myself a chance at the Pro Tour, and that's. You can't do that, and I know that it's easy to just say like, don't get tilted and don't untilt, but like one of the things that I really like listening to is poker players talk about tilt, because one of the things that they talk about is like when somebody makes a bad play and it upsets you, it's kind of silly because you make money from people making bad plays, so you're getting upset at them doing the thing that's going to make you money. And I think that when we think about tilt, the term literally comes from poker. And so my advice to you would be to think past the tilt and train yourself to do it. If you've ever heard the phrase "fake it till you make it," I think it really comes true in these situations. If you are force yourself to be positive enough, eventually it will become natural for you to be positive. That's my advice, John.
Well, I disagree with one thing you said. I don't know if this is right or not, but I think that the term tilt doesn't come from poker. I think it comes from.
No, wait, I know where it comes from. I'm so sorry. It comes from I can't remember the game with the things.
Yeah, the flipper, the pinball machine.
Yeah,
right?
There we go.
Yeah, if you shake the machine too much to try to move your ball, then it goes on tilt and you lose everything. But no, I agree with what you're saying. It's certainly a problem and something that you need to try to overcome. I think it's important to understand that there's a difference between tilt and just disappointment. I think it's natural and okay to be disappointed if you lost 2 PPTQ finals in a row. I think tilt is where like you can't get over the frustration, or you start to play badly as a result. And I don't have that problem so much. I think that I've just naturally developed some immunity to it. But I guess what I would say is when you're, treat it as a goal related problem. Like your goal, obviously you want to not play badly. So, and obviously you want to not dwell in frustration after a loss. So make that your goal and approach it the same way you would approach like tuning your deck list for an event. It's just analyze what's causing it, try to understand, like be realistic in terms of understanding that, yeah, you're going to lose some games to variance. The best players don't win 100% of their games. And just try to think of techniques or things you can do that would make it not feel so bad or damage your play. And I think like I was asking a friend of mine about this, and he said that one thing that would probably help is making the tournament you're playing not the most important thing in your life. I mean, people talk about having the desire to win and being so focused on winning. But if you're enjoying the process and like remember that this is something you're doing for fun, and make sure there are other important things that you value going on in your life, then you can maybe not feel so much pressure that might make you play badly or go on tilt. So those are the things I would say.
Yeah, if you're someone that goes on tilt easily, Magic just might not be the right game for you. I mean, you're gonna get mana screwed or you're gonna flood out X amount of games. Like that's gonna happen to everyone. Sometimes you're gonna be on the good side of it, where your opponent is the one having those unfortunate things happening to you, and then you kind of don't necessarily think about it, right? Because you won and you're like, all right, but then it's just one like you can't control when it happens. It's gonna happen, like LSV Malta 4 in Game 5 of the last Pro Tour. That like obviously it sucks for that to happen at that exact moment, but you never know when it's gonna hit you. I kind of feel like it's gonna even out eventually, and it's just one of those things that it's best to look at it as something outside of your control. Yeah. If you don't do well in a tournament because you get unlucky, then that happens to all of us. We don't, even if you pick the right deck and play perfectly, that's not enough. So yeah, just kind of, I like to go into it, and because I played so many matches of Magic over the years, I don't really think about that type of stuff anymore. I just kind of think about the things that are within my control. So that's my play within the game. So like going back to your original example, Spencer, I wouldn't tilt at all about that because even if my opponent had given me the wrong information, it sounds like you're just playing your Lotus Cobra there. It's getting Lightning Helix. Now your opponent's on Jeskai. It's just that just happened. It doesn't really affect anything else within the match for me.
One of I like what you just said too right before that, Seth.
Yeah.
This is advice we've given on this podcast before, but take a mental note of those moments where your opponent, like if you're tilting a lot, take a moment to take notice of the moments when you're getting lucky, and like be like, oh, you know what? I do get lucky sometimes. My opponent did mulligan to 5. And you know what's funny is you do take – I promise you do take notice because you're probably sitting there behind the keyboard going, yes, 5, 5, 5, 5. But, like, that's you getting lucky. And the times where your opponent misses a land drop, and so maybe you're not that way. Maybe you're like, oh, man, that's so unfortunate. But, like, take that mental note and be like, oh, you know what? This does even out. Like, my opponents get unlucky all the time too.
You know what? When my opponent mulligans to 6 – the thought that goes through my head more often than any other thought is, I hope he doesn't mulligan again because I don't want to wait for him to shuffle. I'm worried about the round time more than I am about anything else. But anyway, I don't like the slow play rules too much.
It was a while back on the podcast. We talked about we did a whole podcast on mulliganing, and one of the things we said is like if you are like you should never be upset that you mulliganed to 6 because you just increased your win percentage. Like. It's before you draw that opening hand, like your win percentage went up, or before you draw that 6.
Yeah.
You clearly mulliganed that hand because you didn't think you could win with it.
Well, unless it was a bad mulligan, but
Well, sure. Well, hopefully you're not doing that. Let's. So the next question comes from Adrian, one of our patrons, and I just want to kind of answer Adrian's question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One of Adrian's questions is, rather than review, he wants thoughts on us reviewing decks better. And I think that since John and Seth have joined the show, I have actively tried to change the way that we're doing this, and I hope that you guys feel it as listeners. We used Seth's deck as a deck of the week. We did power rankings where we tried to really dive deep in different ways than we have before. And I completely agree that it's really easy to just say, I don't know, I think this is like 60-40 and whatever. And that's not going to be our goal anymore. Our goal is going to be, what are the key cards? What are the things that we're thinking about? And the other thing is, like, there's going to be some weeks where I don't have something to say about a deck, where John doesn't have something to say about a deck, when Seth doesn't have something to say about a deck. And that's going to be okay. We're going to be okay with that. But what we are going to do is, like, if none of us know the answer, we're going to say, we don't know too much about this deck, but here is what we think. And we hope that the listeners are okay with that. We hope that we can give better information than just, some numbers that are kind of meaningless.
I think that's very valuable to be talking about. Like, we should be talking about on this podcast decks that we are familiar with. So, like, I'm happy that my Goar deck was the deck of the week, because that's a deck that I know inside and out, right?
Yeah.
If you had asked me about the Lich's Mastery deck, or something, like, I'd be like, well, like, I think you win with Lich's Mastery somehow. Like, I don't know.
Next
I have no idea.
Next week, I think the deck of the week is probably going to be a blue-green Phoenix deck, or blue-green, wow. Blue-red Phoenix deck. Like, we're going to make an effort to give advice on the things that we're currently working on and the things that we currently think are good. And that does mean less power ranking segments. The power rankings are going to become less and less. They're going to be maybe quarterly, maybe every other month. We don't know yet, but it's going to be more. It's going to be more deck of the weeks and things that we have direct insight into and things that we can talk about. So
Yeah, like whatever deck Seth top 8'd with this week, we could do.
I was talking to my wife, and I was like, yeah, Seth top 8'd again this weekend, and she's like, man, he really makes you look bad. And I was like, yeah, that's what I said on the show.
Yeah, welcome to the club. Yeah.
And then she goes, well, isn't he like the number one player in the world? And I was like, not quite,
Close second.
A really close second, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Not
I guess
surprising.
I just to add to that, I think like the way my process works a little bit is if I look at two decks on paper, I will develop some theory about whose advantage and why. And then I'm testing to iterate on that theory. And I think another thing that's important, it's important to be able to communicate how confident you are in your, like if you say like, oh yeah, I think Golgari's favorite against Jeskai, I think it's 60-40, that might be like your first look analysis, which is fine. Or it might be after playing, 50 games of the matchup. And it's important to be able to share, like, not to sort of be hyperbolic about it, but just say like, yeah, I think this deck beats this deck, and I'm, really confident. I've played a lot of it, and I think it's because of these reasons. So yeah, I guess like we should try to do the same on the podcast. We should try to not only say what we think, but also sort of evaluate our confidence and just be this is what I did.
Right? We talked about Jeskai, and I actually got a listener who said, hey, I really loved your take on Jeskai. You were really willing to, talk about why you thought what you thought and then change it the other week. And it's true. Like, I thought that also, by the way, I played against Drakes again with Enigma Drake on Arena twice this week with Jeskai and got crushed. I'm quite confident that is the thing that decides whether the matchup is good or not.
Well, it'll definitely affect percentages.
Yeah. And like, that's the thing is, I think that you have a show here of three people that are not afraid to be wrong and not afraid to be like, oh, actually, I think this, and then also question each other. We got amazing feedback from our episode last week from bouncing back and forth, and we're going to continue doing episodes like that where we're going to disagree sometimes, but we're going to say why we think what we think, because that's the more important piece. So All right. I think we already answered this question earlier, and I should have probably removed it. But what is your deck tuning process like? I think we just answered this like 2 minutes ago, didn't we?
I mean, I can basically, if you're talking about, we did talk about that for how to tune modern decks.
I think tuning is a really interesting word, because going back to, it was like not 2 minutes ago, but like 20 minutes ago when we talked about it. But like, tuning is like such a broad word that it's just hard to tackle, because like the previous time it was asked, John had like a different answer than me, but like I was thinking strictly, choosing cards for the deck, and John was thinking about more broadly than that about the matchups. So like, it's just kind of like, I mean, there's a lot that goes into choosing a deck, tuning a deck. I think we hit most of what we needed to hit though previously.
Yeah.
I could summarize basically, if I'm taking on a format and I want to tune a deck, after I've done the initial exploration phase, I want my tuning process is two things. I'm trying to narrow down my deck selection. So basically everything I'm doing is to sort of narrow down that choice. And I'm creating a list of questions. Like, is this card something I should try? Like, I just list cards to try, list sideboard plans to try, list maybe cutting this card, and just like run through the list of questions, sort of one by one, and always be thinking about how to improve the deck. That's basically it.
Yeah, one of the things that I do on stream, if you ever watch me stream on the Trophy Mages, is I will go into a stream, and at the beginning of the stream, I'll be like, here's some of the cards I have questions about in this deck list. I have questions about this Blink of an Eye. I have questions about whether this should be, an Ixalan's Binding, or whether it should be something else. And then throughout the stream, I'll be like, okay, so like, this was really good here, and here's why it was good. And then at the end of the stream, I'll actually go and talk about those same cards that we talked about at the beginning and say, what did we think of those? Are these something that we want to change? And I think that you don't have to be streamed to do that. You can just do that as you play matches of Magic.
One thing that I've started doing recently more of that I hadn't been doing, and it's been really helpful for me, is coming up with an expected metagame by percentages. So like, if I'm playing standard, come up with, all right, this is exactly what I think the metagame is, and then I just have it in front of me. Or like for modern, like obviously there's a lot more decks, but when you can kind of look at the top, say 5 or 6 decks, and then you kind of know, all right, these are the top 2 decks or whatever. And so like, I want to play a build of my deck that is good against the very top of my list. And then I kind of think about what the most important cards are and how I could change the deck if I wanted to have the best possible version for those top matchups. And I've been kind of trying to do that more often, and it's been feeling pretty, I've been pretty successful doing that.
You said that you were pretty close at the Pro Tour, right?
Yeah, I was, and I just came up with, I'm not going to reveal the exact numbers, but me and my team for the World Magic Cup just kind of went through and it's team unified standard. So like the max that you could play is like 33% of one deck. But we went through all of the decks in standard that we thought might be played. And then once we saw the numbers, we're like, wow, this means we have to really hone in on very specific decks.
Sure.
Because like, I think Golgari is going to be very heavily played, for instance, at the World Magic Cup and that type of thing. But I'm not going to go into too much more detail other than that.
How long for like a PT? How long before the PT do you feel you have an accurate metagame? Like, is it a week before where you usually have your numbers?
I mean, I don't like to do my numbers more than 2 weeks before. I think that's like the longest you can go. I think like a lot of players like to have their decks set ahead of time so that they can get enough reps in with it, and that's certainly reasonable. For me, I'm someone that kind of waits a little bit longer. So personally, it's normally like a week, because like this weekend is the invitational, right? So like those results in standard will probably affect the next week, which is the World Magic Cup and that kind of thing. Like last week, we saw the Phoenix decks do really well. That's going to affect this week in Portland more so. than if 2 weeks ago would I have thought that Phoenix would be one of the top decks in Modern for a given tournament? No, but now I do. So I think you have to make adjustments to those numbers, and so it should be pretty recent.
All right. Our last question says, where do you feel like you were at in your Magic career, and where do you want to get? Seth is in the Hall of Fame, but is he still chasing other goals? John is gold. Is he trying to top 8 at Pro Tour, get platinum? Spencer says his goals have changed recently. What did they change to, and how do you each plan on achieving them? We'll start with the Hall of Famer, Seth.
Well, I think when setting goals, you want to set something that you think you have a good chance of achieving, because it always feels bad if you don't reach a goal. Then it can be very discouraging. So for me, I don't really right now. Yes, I've kind of accomplished some of the top things that a Magic Pro would want. But I don't think it's healthy for me to say going into the next year, I want to be player of the year or something like that, because it's just a lot of it is due to variance. So my goal had been the past 3 years to qualify for the World Championship, because I thought it was something that I could reasonably do, and I was able to do it. But for I think that just kind of going one level up, one more step. It always starts with those small steps. Maybe it's just kind of finding time in your schedule to actually play another league or another competitive event on Arena each week or something like that. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, would be my recommendation for setting goals for yourself.
What is your current Magic goal?
My current Magic goal is
it to win a championship for the United States of America? Because that's never happened before.
No. My current Magic goal is to enjoy playing Magic, and to not let the fact that I am one of the best players, or that this is a job, get in the way of just enjoying playing. That's just my goal, because if I can't enjoy what I'm doing, then sometimes I'll enjoy losing. I'll be like, wow, that's a really good top deck. That sucks, even though I just lost however much money or whatever. Because I'm at the point where I don't really need a win. I don't feel like I need to validate myself in some way. So yeah.
I'll go next. This question's kind of hard for me. So I, for a long time, lived by what Seth just said. I remember on this podcast I talked about, my goal is to get my first pro point this year, and I did it. And then I was like, my goal is to qualify for the Pro Tour this year, and then I did it. And then my wife got pregnant with twins, and we had 2 miscarriages. And then my wife got pregnant again, and we had a miscarriage. And then my wife got pregnant again, and we had a kid. And so my Magic goals have just been put on hold quite a bit the last 3 years, or a little bit more now. 3 years, yeah. It's been tough. So, part of my Magic goals was to help my friends qualify for the Pro Tour. And now all of my best friends have qualified for the Pro Tour. Casey qualified with my deck list, sitting in a room next to me. I've adjusted my goals a lot, but I've also lied to myself a lot. One of the things I wanted to do was get bronze. I was like, I can do that. I not even thinking the fact that I hadn't been playing Magic and had 0 buys, so it was, really tough. But right now, my Magic goal is really simple, and that's to play Magic at a high enough level to be able to be on a podcast with John Stern and Seth Manfield. That might sound silly, but that's my job right now in Magic. It's just to be able to sit down and ask these guys the right questions, because they're way better than me in Magic, and these guys are really smart, and so my job is to try and get the most out of them, and that's what I'm focusing on right now. I've played Arena's a huge help for that, for being a dad, and Magic Online is going to be a huge help for that, but that's my goal right now. John?
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think my answer is kind of a little bit like what Seth said. So you could talk about the next step in terms of accomplishments. And if you do that, the next step for me would be either platinum or top 8 at Pro Tour. Top 8ing a Pro Tour would be more important for me, or what I would care more about. I think platinum to me has always been just sort of a cash windfall that doesn't really isn't functionally that different from gold. But I think my actual goal, I have two goals in Magic right now. The first and most important one is to be able to make it like give a good effort at Pro Tours without putting everything else in my life on hold, without stopping other projects or delaying them. I don't want to mail it in and like not be prepared. I want to feel like I'm prepared and can do well, but with a better balance. And I've had trouble doing that in the past, so that is my primary goal, more so than anything related to results. Yeah, I guess really that's the main thing. But I guess like in terms of my results goals, my goal is always to be as prepared as possible for my next event. So my goal right now is to be as prepared as possible for GP Portland. And at some point, my goal will be to be as prepared as possible for PT Cleveland. And the goal, I think it's important for me anyway, to not like my goal isn't to top 16 or top 32 or X5 the PT. It's to be as prepared as possible. I want to not go into the PT thinking that I could have done a better job time management or I'm playing the wrong deck and I know it, which is kind of how I felt at the last PT. Honestly, I thought mono red was the wrong deck before the tournament, and I feel after the tournament that I was right. So yeah, that's my goals are based on preparation and life balance more so than results.
Yeah. Well, I hope they pay off for you, man. Because
Yeah,
I think that if there's, I've said this to you before, but you're just one of the guys I root for. So, all right, so that's it for this week. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/ccmtg. We're 30% of the way to turning Seth into a construct. You know, some people that's their goal in life. They just want to see Seth as a robot. So, if you want to see that, you gotta go to patreon.com/ccmtg. And John has not decided.
You know what? That's my goal. My goal is for next week to decide what token I want to be. Okay, I changed it. I don't care about Portland anymore. I hope I missed day 2, so I have more time to think.
No, don't say that.
No.
You can find me at Spencer H. You can find Seth at Seth Manfield. You can find John at John Stern MTL. That's wrong.
No, that's right.
Oh, all right.
I thought of another goal, by the way, and that's an immediate goal. I have to sort through my cards because cards can multiply on you.
Oh yeah, that's on my list of things to do for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can join the conversation by joining the Constructor Criticism family on Facebook. If you're a patron of $12 or more, you have access to the Constructor Critics group where you have access to additional content. You can also join the Discord. There's conversations going on there. There's obviously that contest going on in the Discord. So if you play a lot of online or, we've even allowed paperless. So people have posted their standings at the end of FNMs and we've allowed those in. So if you're playing Magic and you're doing 4-1 or better, please, come in and post those for us so that we can get the conversation going about decks. So, my goal is that next week, Seth Manfield makes the United States, or 2 weeks from now, Seth Manfield makes the United States proud and we get our first championship. Go Team America. Sorry, up north. You're not getting us this time.
Well, we haven't had that much success at the World Magic Cup actually, but we'll see.
And let's keep it that way. You're not.
The U.S. has won Worlds before, right? Like I know that U.S. has won Worlds.
I don't think we have.
What? They must have. Didn't like.
I don't think we've ever won the World Magic Cup.
No.
You're right. There was a team that wasn't the World Magic Cup though, right?
Because Canada's definitely done it, right?
That was Team World. It was Team Worlds, but it wasn't like the World Magic Cup.
Yeah. Okay. So predates that, sure.
Yeah. The World Magic Cup is. I don't think it's. Has it ever been won by like a major country?
I mean, Japan won it the last year, right?
Yeah.
Oh, did Japan win it? Okay.
France has won, right?
Is that a major country?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Let's not get into politics here.
U.S. Yeah, let's not only count U.S. as the only major country. There's some other ones out there.
I was just kidding. I have to be stereotypical American. Somebody has to be stereotypical American, right? That's why it's funny.
Personally, I love hearing the coverage of Rich talking about the Panama guys or like whoever, and I'm just like, wow, there's all of these countries out there that are playing
cool.
Magic.
It's legitimately one of my favorite tournaments to watch. Like, yeah. It is. It's like, and this means I've heard so many people go on different podcasts or different videos and just talk about what it means to them to play for their country, and like that's so cool. Like I'm so glad that that's the feeling people get. So, Seth, who are your teammates?
It's Justin Andrus and Dylan Brown. Hopefully, I'm saying their names correctly. But yeah, we've been talking online. I wasn't too familiar with them before the event, but they seem like really nice guys. So one of them just has a newborn, but yeah, they've been testing hard. So yeah, hopefully it pays off.
Yeah. Well, if you guys win, we'll have them on. So, all right. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you guys all next week.
All right.